Hey there. When I was writing earlier, it sort of struck me that a lot of what I was writing, even though other people, or many of these experiences were part of them, I have never shared this aspect of the unfoldings with anybody. So I'm going to start this by saying I don't know when exactly it was that I began experiencing direct encounters with deities that most people are familiar with. Especially of the human variety. I know back in 2014, that's when my relationship began with characters that are part of the Navajo Nation creation stories. The Alien Slayer, although I didn't know it in October of 2014, sees me as his twin. And so he's the one who was as far as I can tell, the catalyst, the initial catalyst to get me into the missing and murdered Indigenous women work, especially as it relates to the Navajo Nation. In a video that I posted, I think on Sunday, the storytelling one, I think is part 2, I talked about how the stone came through and called me daughter, and it wasn't a label, it was a name. And when stone spoke, it was the most beautiful way somebody had ever said my name. They made my name safe. There's a quote by somebody else that says that much better than I just did. But I had these encounters with a variety of beings that were mostly not associated with religion as most Europeans understand it. Europeans and Asians. I do remember that my first encounter with anything that I would call the mother was in 2015 when I was house sitting in Helena, Montana. And I was on the telephone with another woman who was deeply, deeply grieving. Somebody that she knew had died in an automobile accident. And while she is just weeping and ranting, I am feeling all of it. And I was sitting down on the kitchen floor with my back up against the oven. And I am holding this woman the best I can from a distance. And I am weeping, and I'm with her in everything, feeling everything. And then all of a sudden, Mary, the mother of Jesus, sits down on the dirty kitchen floor right next to me. No word was said, no nothing. She's just there. And I was like all these other encounters. I was like, but wait, what? Okay. That began a string of regular experiences with her. I could feel her presence in sweat lodges. I could feel her presence when I was in the car going somewhere, doing something for somebody else. But for the longest time, her presence was just that. She wasn't asking for anything, like say ancestors from a multitude of indigenous nations would just come and say, here, you're going here, blah, blah, blah. She never said that. And then in the autumn of 2017, when I was beginning the hardcore work with the focus on missing and murdered Indigenous women, Mother Mary kept appearing. I was staying in a variety of hotels in the Phoenix and Scottsdale area, and my room would just fill with, for the lack of a better phrase, with angelic light. The Polish version of Maria Goretti, the patron saint for rape victims, showed up. And more, but Mother Mary would pop in as well. And a couple of times she sent me to different sanctuaries in the Phoenix area. And I didn't understand why. But I would get there, and in addition, like, I didn't have to be inside my head trying to figure this out. My processes, my prayers, my understandings were shared with another. And I don't know if it's because these spaces were sacred and holy, or it's because I needed that mental reminder, a shift of space that allowed me to connect with something bigger than me. And then for a while, she just sort of disappeared, or if she was around, I didn't feel her. That was one of the more intense, not one of the more, that was the most intense experience of my entire life. And it was in February of 2018. I was through in so many ways. I was through, and I was suicidal. And it wasn't just suicidal. I had a plan. I was so done. I figured if ancestors could talk to me in the way that they were, and I could understand, and I knew exactly what was happening, and I was like, well, if they can do this for me, I can rattle the cages of others better outside of a body anyway. And my hair was falling out by the handfuls, and I was profoundly exhausted and under a deep threat. So I was like, let me just take care of this myself. And I had my plan, and I went to bed. And on this night, Mother Mary came. And she stood in front of me. And put her hands together. Please stay. Please. Continue. Please don't give up. Please. And behind her, hundreds and hundreds of other female haloed figures with their hands together in prayer, saying, please stay. Please don't give up. Y'all, clearly I'm here. Because what do you say, not just to the mother, hundreds of iterations behind her, representing things that you can't even imagine because you don't have the language for, saying, please stay. Please don't give up. So fuck all if I didn't wake up, have my coffee, and begin all over again, knowing that this was so much bigger than me. And I had to, and I couldn't say no. It's more than not being able to say no to Mary, the mother of Jesus. It's when something becomes so clear that it's about more than you, in a way that you can't even articulate, except that you know you can't give up, that you must go on. That was that moment. And I learned that I could call her the same names I call God. Although she wasn't as much of a presence from 2018 until COVID times. It was during COVID, where she was insistent that I finish the book that I was writing called Into the Lion's Den. And it was all about knocking heads with the Sinaloa cartel in Indian country. And I would just be so exhausted, so done, and she would push and she would push. And there was one day, I was just waking up, but I crawled back into bed with my coffee, and she shows up in a eyes wide open vision. And as a way to cajole or shame, possibly, me into continued action, pushing me beyond limits, she shows me Cal Ripken Jr. as a way to get me to keep going. And I'm like, this isn't a baseball game, except that's what it took to get me to keep going. And I did. Not that the book is finished, because we haven't finished this whole whatever it is we're doing around this, but I began to, so that was 2020. In 2021, I simultaneously lost housing in Ridgeway, Colorado, and ended up in Denver, Sierra Vista, Arizona, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. And as I began moving into these spaces, that's when I think the idea of mother being an external thing began forming internally, or at least my awareness of its internality began. I had, in the spring of 2021, I had a class called The Mother Rising. And I don't even remember how I marketed it. I remember it was a small class, but as I'm conducting these classes, something is happening within me that I can't quite name, except it was clear that I actually hadn't made this class for other people. It was all about what happened in this shared experience and how my body and mind were entwined in the process. It wasn't until I got to Sierra Vista when I began experiencing an inordinate amount of Kundalini transitioning that was directly connected to the movement of Shakti through my spine. And not just through my spine, but through every cell in my body. And blessedly, I was with somebody who could hold space for that while I just laid on the floor, and with Ananda my Ma holding my head, I just let my body thrash and writhe repeatedly day after day, doing everything I could to not lose my mind and not lose bodily functions, because that would have been bad. And each iteration of what I was experiencing deepened, and it deepened some more. And I still didn't have ways to articulate it, especially to the person I was staying with. However, while all of this was going on internally, I was also beginning to experience other external visitations by other iterations of the Mother. Our Lady of Guadalupe, who I called the Lavender Lady for the longest time because that's how she appeared to me, both in color and smell and the gentle touch that she's known for. She always appears on my right arm, and on my left arm I began experiencing I'm just gonna say it like I'm saying it to me. I began experiencing Yemojah, the mother of the ocean, the mother of water, and all of creation very, very viscerally on my left arm. And I can't remember what the catalyst of that was, or how it was that I knew exactly what it was that I was experiencing. But I thought, okay. I will not use the language here that I used then, but there were powerful forces that were working with me in ways that I had no intellectual awareness of, and could not articulate to anyone else other than to say, oh, holy shit. And it was shit, and by God, it was holy. It was so holy. But all of this began moving through into something more obvious when I ended up in the Washington, D.C. area in December of 22. It was then not only I, but others around me could feel the voice emanating from my belly. The energies were so intense so many times that I was certain I was going to lose my teeth. It would push up from my belly, through my chest, into my jaws. And I thought, I really did think that one day I'm going to be in this experience, mostly in the kitchen, and my teeth were going to end up on the floor in front of the refrigerator. And there was, it just became clear that the voice, her voice, was this thing that was within my belly that was pushing through. And it was confirmed when I had that conversation with God at the National Cathedral that I talked about in Storytelling Part 1, I think. So these experiences for which there was no context when I was in them were building a foundation for what is evolving now into the audible public expression of God's voice in the form of the mother. And again, I still don't know what that looks like, except I have a new awareness every day, and each new awareness brings a string of questions, and each of these questions brings more, oh, no shit moments that I will share as they arise. Some of this is not for public consumption. Much of it, however, it is being documented in many ways so that the original exists for time immemorial, and there isn't room in the future for distortions that we have seen in past iterations. Anyhow, that's a good chunk of my journey with the mother, moving from an external forces in a multitude of iterations, and that now morphing into an internal growth to be expressed publicly in words that don't need interpretation, as God said. More later as all of this whatnot evolves. Bye. I love you.